have to think about my name.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, guys, thanks for coming. I always like to survey who's in the audience so we know who we talk to. So how many of you guys are artists or in bands? Cool. And how many of you are industry or managers? And anybody here from an ad agency or, okay, great. So I'll start by making a quick introduction and letting everybody else introduce themselves. My name is Panos Panay. I'm the founder of Sonic Bids. And most of you guys know us as a matchmaking site for about 300,000 bands and 25,000 different events around the world, including this very one. But also what's interesting, over the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years, we've started getting approached by more and more consumer brands that are interested in working with us, and primarily working with our artists and the audience that our artists have with respect to creating music marketing initiatives or marketing initiatives that use music as a means for these brands to reach their end customer. And what's cool about emerging music is that ultimately a lot of the people that listen to it are in some ways the hardest folks for a lot of these brands to reach. They're young, they're early adopters, they use the internet quite a bit, but on the other hand, they're not the folks who plug themselves in front of the TV or listen to radio all the time or read magazines. So as marketing has shifted and as the ways of reaching these people has become more and more difficult, we've seen more and more brands reach out to folks like us on the panel to come up with creative programs to reach these folks. I read a very interesting statistic about, I would say, since about in the last 3 or 4 years, total spending from record labels with respect to developing emerging talent has dropped from what used to be $8 or $9 billion to roughly about $4 to $5 billion. Still a lot of money, but about half of what it used to be. And what's amazing is that over the last couple of years, spending by consumer brands around programs that have to do with music has more than doubled to about $1 billion, and it's projected that over the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to probably climb to about $3 to $4 billion. So what's pretty amazing is that soon enough, there's a good chance that consumer brands will be spending more money in funding, developing, promoting, and distributing music than a lot of the traditional labels that most of us grew up with, and most of us use them as channels to find music. So for me, this is creating all kinds of opportunities. If you look at maybe the 2 most influential names in music in the last decade, maybe the first part of the 2000s, I would say Starbucks, and the second part, and certainly to now, it's Apple, none of which have traditional music roots. So these brands are playing a bigger and bigger role. So we're here to talk a whole lot more about it. So I'll turn the mic over to my buddies over here who will go ahead and introduce themselves, and then we'll kick it off. So Adam, you want to start?
Hi, I'm Adam Shore. I started in the label side. I started the Vice Records label, and for 6 years ran the label and did A&R for bands like Block Party and the Stills and the Streets and Death from Above, 1979, and Justice and the Black Lips. At Vice, I started working with some brands, helping out different projects Vice was doing with Scion. Once I left Vice, I continued to work for Scion. I've done some consulting also for Red Bull and Dell and NBC, I do a lot of work with Scion on all their different music initiatives. I also manage the band Best Coast. I run a metal series a metal concert series in New York called the Black and Music series, and the website The Daily Swarm, which I don't know if you guys know. Yeah, good. Okay, you should read that if you can. It's kind of like a Huffington Post for music. It's like a music news and music business aggregator. And I also look after the J Retard estate. There's a film, the documentary film of his is at 5:30 today. If you guys want to check that out. Thanks.
Nice, thanks.
Hey guys, I'm Hudson Sullivan, Toronto born and raised, and living down in New York right now. I'm working at PepsiCo, and I work specifically on Mountain Dew, and I work sort of on the brand side. So I'm the one who's tapping into these guys to help me figure out how we kind of continue to build equity within the music space for a brand like Mountain Dew. So I've had a lot of fun working on a Green Label Sound project that kind of began when I first came to Pepsi back in the fall of 2008, and has now evolved into something pretty cool. So it started off as sort of a singles release type model, has now sort of evolved into something where we're about to launch a Cool Kids album on iTunes on July 12th, with 100% of the revenue from that album going towards the Cool Kids. So pretty cool, really enjoying it, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Jake Hearn. I work for the marketing agency at Cornerstone. I do strategic marketing for them. We work on a number of sort of brand campaigns, from Kia to Green Label Sound, obviously from Mountain Dew, to Microsoft, Bushmills, whiskey, Red Stripe, whatnot. And I think maybe our sort of specialty is sort of music integration with these brands.
Thanks. Okay, so there's obviously a lot of discussion about the role that these brands are playing, and many people, including myself, have talked about brands being in some ways the new record labels. I'd love to get your reaction to that comment. Are these consumer brands the new record labels? Are they in it for the long haul? Is this just some ephemeral trend that's going to go away in the next couple of years? Are they carpetbaggers, or are they here to stay?
Well, I think, the one defining characteristic of a record label is that the label signs an artist for a long period of time, usually for 3 to 5 to 7 records. The sort of breakdown in the music industry in all these years have been when that deal stops working. Sometimes it stops working the week it starts, sometimes it stops working after a few records, but at some point, the money that the label is spending doesn't really come back in the way that they want it to, and it causes a lot of friction with the artist, and that's where the record label model was broken from day one. I'm kind of amazed that it lasted for the 50, 60 years that it did. I think that with all of these things that the brands are doing, they're very limited time periods, and when it's a very limited time period, it's simply helping fund something that the artist is working on, without expectations, without long-term contracts, and I think now that if those things aren't on the table, then that sort of friction won't exist or can't exist in the same way that it used to.
Hudson, you guys have been in this for a while, right? Can you tell us a bit about the background of the program, and how you got involved in it, and sort of what is the philosophy of Mountain Dew around music? Because indeed, and at Sony, we work with some brands like Midas that are just in it for a year, and it's part of their marketing, and they're really focused, and that's it. And then the next year they move on to something else. And sometimes we work with brands like Diesel that have been in it for 10 years plus. So can you tell us a bit about your philosophy and how you got involved, and more importantly, what the program is, and why music and not film or something else?
Yeah, for sure. So, Pepsi has a long-standing heritage of building out these really robust music campaigns. Whether it's been working with artists like Britney or Justin or Beyonce, they've always kind of been that big sort of pop brand. And I think it was kind of right around the summer of 2008 where we started taking a look at Mountain Dew, and how could Mountain Dew create their own music strategy, and what's Mountain Dew's niche within the music industry, because it's certainly not Britney and it's not Justin. So we felt like we really wanted to tap into emerging music, and the reason for that was we really felt like working with artists at that point in their careers gave us the opportunity to really make an impact on them. So it's how do we become part of their story, and how do we sort of weave sort of our brand and our positioning and sort of the sensibilities of our brand into what it is that these guys are doing, and can Mountain Dew be that driving force that helps propel a brand, an artist and their brand to the next level. So that was really the thinking, and I think what's so great about music and why music really makes sense is that all these artists have their own unique styles and flavors and personalities, and with Mountain Dew we had a product that we kind of pride ourselves on being bold and distinctive. And there's so many artists out there that are so unique and interesting in terms of their approach, their live performance, the way they dress. They become perfect vehicles for us to kind of communicate our brand positioning. It's like, hey, look at how an artist like Theophilus London, for who we've worked with, or Chromeo, for example, look at how they really represent the brand, and they really mirror the sensibilities of the brand. And then that can become something really powerful, when you create cool stories like that.
Is emerging music attractive to you guys because to some degree there's not been as much money invested behind the artist in creating a brand, that you guys are kind of starting with a blank canvas to some degree, and you can kind of collaborate with the artist on that branding?
Yeah, I think collaborate is really the key word. It's not an endorsement, you know what I mean? It's not, that model doesn't work, and that's why we got into the whole idea of how do we create music? How does Green Label Sound, how does Mountain Dew use Green Label Sound really create content and offer something of value? So it's not sponsoring Coachella or South by and just being wallpaper, at the right music festivals or concerts or whatever it is, but it's actually integrating your brand in a really meaningful and impactful way.
Can you tell us a bit about the program, exactly what it does?
Yeah, so Green Label Sound it started off as sort of a traditional singles release label. So what we would do is essentially hook up with artists that were kind of at that right point in their careers, as I said, where we felt like we could still be part of their story, really make an impact, and help expose them to new audiences. So that was really the key, that essence of the program is how do we take artists and really expose them to new audiences? And then, from a more consumer-facing point of view, how do we become curators? And how do we, say to our consumers, and hopefully, new potential consumers, hey, these are artists that we really like, and we really think you guys are going to be into them too. And then if you want to go even deeper, and here's how their sort of unique style represents Mountain Dew and the essence of what makes the brand so special. So we started off releasing singles. You hook up with an artist, you get an exclusive piece of content. So the goal was, how do we get a piece of content that we can own, that people have to come to Mountain Dew to be able to get and grab and interact with? We would do a small media buy around each of these artists. For a lot of these artists, this is the first time that their likeness, their name, or whatnot has ever been generated into like banner ads and whatnot that are online, and you have people that are now exposed to these guys that would have never been exposed to them before. So. So we're doing small media buys around these guys. We're doing a PR push, and we work with Cornerstone to kind of help us do this, to help sort of drive the story around each of these individual artists. And we put them on tour. We've got other platforms like the Dew Tour, which is our big action sports tour, which serve as great opportunities to kind of get these guys out there. And
you work with MTV on that too, right?
Well, not for long.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Okay. I think it's public now. I think it's going to be public on Monday. NBC actually has now purchased
cool.
Full stake.
So Jake, I mean, you guys have been in this for a while, and to some degree, Cornerstone has been a bit of a pioneer in bringing, music and brands together. And obviously, you guys work on this, and you've worked on stuff with Levi's and Kia, and you do a big thing with Converse too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you tell us a bit about that? And actually, how did you even get into this whole mad business to begin with?
It's interesting. I was working at a label, Palm Pictures, Chris Blackwell, and I met John Cohen and Rob Stone of the company, working on. They did marketing for us for the Directors Label series. The box set had Spike Jones and Michelle Knight and stuff. We got along really well, and they offered me a job, and I was just like, that's really interesting. And I was working at a record label, and I was like, the end is near. You know what I mean? So where do I move, and where do I go from here? And it was a way to sort of take the skills that I have, which are, a really great database in music, knowing clearances, licensing, and then just having done A&R and marketing for a label, and go to an agency that really treats each brand like it's an album release, or each campaign like it's an album release. And that's sort of the founding ideal of Cornerstone is we take a brand and we say, okay, we're going to build a campaign, and we're going to traditionally go and market this like it's an album release. And so things like Green Label Sound are a perfect fit. It's really interesting. I want to go back to, will brands be record labels?
Yeah.
Or are they the new record labels? And I don't think in a traditional sense they ever will be, because the brands are always going to be brands. PepsiCo isn't going to stop selling Pepsi, Mountain Dew, and all of the products just to put out music. That's never going to happen. But what's really interesting is sort of, I think, the difference between what you get out of these sort of brand partnerships and what you get out of a record label, which is, especially with the Cool Kids, we were just talking, Hudson had mentioned it, like they're putting an album out. There will be more money spent on snipes, like posters, like in cities like LA and New York and Chicago, than probably their previous label had ever spent on any album. You know what I mean? the budgets for these releases are amazing, and they go, you look at them as, Pepsi, I guess, will look at them as a marketing budget, and there's no recoupment for it, So this album goes up on iTunes and they sell it, all that money goes straight back to them, A lot of the programs we do, like, I guess Converse is a good one. We did 2 different original songs. Actually, we've done 2 in the UK as well, but 2 in North America. The first was Pharrell Williams, Santi Gold, and Julian Casablancas. And basically, we put all 3 of them together in the studio, and we were like, let's do an amazing song for Converse's anniversary. And then we did another one with Best Coast, and Kid Cudi, and Rostam from Vampire Weekend. And again, here are opportunities for these artists to, they end up getting an artist fee for participating. They get this amazing exposure through Converse's channels, touching people that they probably never touched without this sort of branding. And then of course the album goes on iTunes, or the song goes on iTunes, it sells, and they get all the money. And it's just sort of like, if I thought the music industry or the record label was dead 5 years ago, now I know it. You know what I mean? It's like, this is the way that business works.
And when I say they're becoming the new labels, I'm not necessarily, at least from my standpoint, I'm not looking at them as necessarily becoming, co-owners of what they're releasing. But if you look at a label as primarily sort of funding something, distributing something, and helping it find an audience and really marketing it, it seems to me that a lot of these brands are kind of stepping into that. And I mean, Converse, I'd love to hear a bit about this. There was a huge article in the New York Times about 7-8 months ago around Converse's music initiatives, and one of them is these guys have a whole studio, right? Why the hell does Converse care about having a music studio?
It's interesting. I mean, for Converse, I think if you look back through rock, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you see all these musicians and all these real rockers, and they all wear Converse. You go to a show tonight, any show you go to, all these bands are wearing Converse. And that's not some kind of sponsorship or product deal. That's just because Converse lives in that world, For the studio and a lot of the initiatives they do, it really is giving back to their consumers. Converse doesn't need to somehow be cool with these consumers because they already are, For them, it's giving something back. And so they wanted to do something where they could figure out how do we build original content again and be able to get back to our consumer. And we've done these songs with them, and then they were like, what's the next step? And we were just kind of like, why don't you make a studio? We'll build a studio, people can come in, they can record a single, they can record an EP, whatever it is, we'll make it free, and we'll give everybody the opportunity to actually create their own music. So
how do you find your way? So if you're one of these artists, how do you find your way to Converse's recording studio?
I think it goes up in a couple weeks, but basically you can apply online. And the idea is not to give the studio to the Strokes. That's not what Converse is in it for. Converse is in it for emerging artists who don't have funding, don't have labels, don't have some kind of backing support, to be able to come in and make music. So we have an in-house producer, engineers, Neb consoles. It's crazy.
And what's interesting, we were doing a lot of work with the folks from Red Bull, and they have a state-of-the-art studio in London. And you said the studio's not for the Strokes.
Yeah.
Why? Why new music? And I know that Hudson touched on it, but why? And obviously I have my own answers, but a lot of these artists don't have a big audience, right? They're not major brands. So unlike Sears that sponsored Gloria Estefan, or Pepsi that sponsored Madonna or Michael Jackson, it's not like these artists, reach a huge audience. Why is it? So what are they trying to do with it?
I think also all the cover artists that go in the video are, usually 6 months to a year, right before they break out. And then Fader's a part of that story, like being able to be a part of that story where you work with an artist and you've taken them to the next level. It's an amazing feeling for the artist, it's an amazing feeling for the company, and it's great PR, and it's a great history. So when you go back and you want to work with them again, they're interested in it because they know, who's on their side. So I think being first and on the cusp is also part of that sort of influencer marketing idea. If you can establish that sort of first 5 people that are going to love it, and they tell all their friends, then all of a sudden it's it's that great feeling that the consumer gets from being first on something.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why a lot of these brands come to us is, our average artist reaches about 5,500 people through social media, which is it's not a lot. You know, Lady Gaga has 30 million followers or whatever on Twitter. What's amazing is that, you know, these emerging artists, you guys, us, talk to their fans on a daily basis. Their relationships are really rich and deep in a way that the average established artist just doesn't have. So if you find a way as a brand to tap into these relationships, and if you also motivate a lot of bands at the same time, you know, let's say at Sony, because if you do a program and you get 10,000 bands to participate, all of a sudden you're talking to 5 million people, and you're talking to them in a very intimate way. So
mainly because music is cheap. Bands are cheap. You know, the amount of money that we're talking about that Scion and that Mountain Dew and that Converse is spending is a tiny percentage of normal advertising campaign. But to musicians, it's a shitload of money. And also, music is the easiest way to emotionally connect with an audience for the cheapest price. So, I mean, you know, we shouldn't be naive here. These brands are using artists to make them cool. And the artists get certain amounts of help and resources out of it, but it's not pure
I think it depends on
altruism.
the brand, though. You know what I mean? Like, again, like a Converse would be cool. You know what I mean? They already are. But there are brands out there that definitely need that credit.
well, it's interesting you brought up. I know you would do a lot of work with Toyota Scion, right? So how the hell is Toyota Scion selling one more car? You know, because they're sponsoring or behind emerging music. I'd love to just get your thoughts on that.
There is actually no correlation whatsoever between any of the music projects we do and car sales, none at all. There is a halo effect. The idea is that at some point, everyone will buy a car. The sector's research says that the majority of people, I think it's almost 70% of people who buy a car in one car line will stay in that line for the rest of their lives. So you buy a $16,000 Scion now, chances are you may buy a Lexus when you're older, and that's good odds for them. But you know, it's also that, you know, on the Scion side, it's you know, it's almost more of like a grant and resource system rather than these sort of really straightforward market initiatives. I liken it more to the way like Citibank sponsors the series at Carnegie Hall. You know, because Scion has very little direct, except for the name Scion. There's never any connection between the car and the artist. There's never any endorsement from the artist. But on the Scion side, we put out 22 records a year, whether they're full-lengths, EPs, singles, or remixes. We give those away. We also sell them, and the artist gets 100% of it, and the artists own all the masters. We make 40 videos a year. We do a metal festival every year and a garage rock festival. We have 17 streaming radio stations. We sponsor 90 events a month. We have our own music conference. We make right now we've got 3 different music documentary films in production. We work with about 200 artists a year. Our budgets are relatively small per artist. Our deals are very artist friendly and very short.
What are those budgets? I mean, can you disclose roughly even a range?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if we're doing an EP with an artist, they might get $5,000 for it.
But they keep the rights to that?
They keep the rights 100%, and we press up vinyl and CDs for them, so they can give it away or bundle it with their merch. With Scion only wants to be in genres of music that no other brand is really in. So we only work in extreme metal, garage rock, and techno, and that's it. And even the techno we work in is not Electric Daisy Carnival techno. It's like Detroit techno.
How are those genres picked? Well, I mean, why? Did somebody sit down and say, okay, I know my demo listens to extreme metal?
Well, we want to, we want to be in very vibrant music communities, and there aren't any other brands that are talking not only to that audience, but to these artists. A lot of metal acts, their recording budgets are $2 or $3 grand for an entire album. They don't get tour support. It's a battle getting paid at the end of the night. And if you can go to them and say, hey, we really like you, we'd like to sponsor your shows and do a record with you and make a video for you, the amount of the positive artist feedback you get is amazing. And then they tell their friends and their label mates and their tour mates, and it very quickly you wind up working with so many artists and in so many different areas of their career that it starts to be like we're kind of a patron to an entire scene of music instead of just like putting out a single.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is what's interesting. So when you look at the role of a traditional label, it used to be, you know, they would help you produce your album and put a lot of money behind that, especially back in the day where going to a studio was really, really expensive. They would help you distribute your record by getting it in front of, back then, in their record stores and so forth, promote it, right, and ultimately help you reach an audience. And what's interesting is that for the longest of time, I think people would say, well, tell us about how the internet has ever helped, you know, break a new artist. And a lot of people would say, well, even though you can make music really cheaply and distribute it really cheaply, nobody can really market music as well as labels know how to do it. But what's amazing about what we're talking about here is that to some degree, what these brands know how to do better than anybody else on the planet is actually market and get a message out there. And we've seen the amount of resources that brands have put behind artists. You know, I'll give you a quick example. We worked with Universal Pictures to launch a new movie back last summer called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. And they came to us and they gave us clips of the movie and they said, you know, we want bands to take these clips, make new music videos using their music, put them up on a site, have people vote for their favorite video. And what was cool is that that one band's video, which ended up being a band called Gorgeous Got a Gun from Los Angeles, got to be in the DVD release, which got distributed to God knows how many millions of people. And the band was flown to Los Angeles to open at the grand premiere of the movie at Comic-Con. And they had Jason Schwartzman presenting the band, and they got this worldwide audience. So what's amazing is that we're seeing these labels kind of jump in, and now I think that last piece of marketing is really being fulfilled by these guys. So I'm going to go back to Hudson for a minute. So when you sit down with your, you know, with your boss at the end of the year and you're deciding whether or not you're going to do this thing all over again, what determines it? Like, what do you look at that says, yeah, this is coming, you know, back to us in some way? And the second question is, do you ever foresee you guys saying, you know what, this is all fine and dandy, but goddamn it, we got to start taking 20% of everything that our artists sell, or pull a label, 85% of what's being sold?
Yeah, man, lot of responses. Some good questions. I think number one, to answer your first question, you know, how do we sit down at the end of the year and sort of reevaluate? Do we do this all over again? And what kind of analytics, what metrics are we looking at? Because it's tough. As Adam said, I mean, you see so little direct correlation between actually putting out this content and, you know, an increase in purchase intent, you know, or volume, or, you know, we're closing distribution gaps as a result of Green Label Sound. I think, you know, at the end of the year, what we always look at, you know, we look at the industry and we say there's so much potential here. You know, that's what's cool. And I think what's interesting about companies like Pepsi that are putting out, you know, consumer product goods that reach so many different people is, you know, when you've got this label that, you know, this is the greatest medium we have to communicate with our consumers. So we're always thinking about, you know, for example, how do we leverage our packaging as a way to distribute this kind of content? Because that's something that we can bring to the table that a traditional label can't. No, we definitely don't have the functional expertise, and we don't know how to market artists ourselves nearly as well as a Cornerstone or Adam would. But what we do have is we've got all these amazing tools. First, we have big budgets for Pepsi, you know, so we have money that we can put behind projects. But more importantly, we've got cool elements like our packaging, like our point of sale materials that so many people interact with every day. So if we can figure out, you know, how to start leveraging those as, you know, new consumer touch points, where if someone trains their, you know, their BlackBerry or their smartphone on a Mountain Dew logo, fuck the QR code, you know, just put it like straight logo recognition, and they're getting music, or they're, you know, they're able to interact with, you know, with our artists and their content. That's pretty cool. We did a program that we really didn't know what it was going to be, but we worked with Taco Bell. So Taco Bell is one of